Hey everyone! Welcome to The Young and the Restless. I'm Jane, and I'm so excited to have you here. If you love Young and the Restless, then you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Alright, let's dive right in. According to spoilers for The Young and the Restless, Nikki Newman may fear as a killer cliffhanger strikes. Who will come to Nikki's rescue after she is cornered in Nice? The week of July 21st to 25th will be filled with even more drama because the murderer has yet to be apprehended. Damian Kane's killer is still free and could commit additional atrocities, therefore there are legitimate concerns. After Carter places Nick and Sharon Newman under home arrest, Nick plans an escape that ends with a twist. Nick will be harmed during his escape attempt, but at least he will have Sharon and, eventually, Sally Spectra to help him in the messy aftermath. Nick may end himself in the killer's path, but it is also possible that a security guard will use his firearm on Nick. In either case, Nick will not be the only one in great risk. By the end of the July 25th episode, Nikki will feel surrounded and afraid. Will Nikki see someone following her in the darkness or something along those lines? It's simple to see Nikki screaming or pleading for her life if she senses someone approaching to get rid of her. If Nikki becomes a target, she may suspect Kane because she has been impeding his chancellor aims. Whatever the case may be, it appears that Nikki is in danger. YNR may be setting the stage for a jaw-dropping cliffhanger, so who will come to Nikki's rescue when all hope seemed lost? Could Victor Newman be the one who botches the killer's next move, since YNR teasers indicate he'll be in command of some escalating drama? That is one thing to examine. Sally and Billy Abbott will also help an innocent victim shortly, although it may be related to Nick's problem. Could Kane demonstrate some guts by saving Nikki and disrupting the killer's plans? It might help show Kane's innocence if he does something big and daring for Nikki. Nikki's heart pounded violently against her ribs as she stumbled backward, her feet slipping on the loose gravel beneath her. The edge of the cliff loomed dangerously close, and one wrong move would send her plummeting into the abyss below. The wind howled around her, whipping her hair into her face, obscuring her vision as she frantically tried to regain her balance. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps, each one burning her lungs as the reality of her situation crashed over her. She had been so sure of her escape route, so confident in her ability to outmaneuver them, but now, cornered and desperate, she realized just how wrong she had been. The menacing figures advancing toward her showed no mercy, their cold eyes glinting with triumph as they closed in. Nikki's mind raced, scrambling for a solution, for any possible way out of this nightmare. She had survived so much already: betrayal, danger, heartbreak, but this? This felt like the end. The jagged rocks far below seemed to mock her, a deadly reminder of how quickly everything could be over. Her fingers clawed at the air, searching for something, anything to hold on to, but there was nothing. Just empty space and the terrifying certainty that she was out of options. The leader of the group smirked, taking another deliberate step forward, savoring her fear. "Nowhere left to run," he taunted, his voice dripping with malice. Nikki's stomach twisted, her pulse roaring in her ears. She couldn't give up. She wouldn't. But what could she do? A sudden noise cut through the tension, a sharp, unmistakable sound that made everyone freeze. A gunshot. Then another. The men surrounding her spun around, their smug expressions dissolving into shock as chaos erupted. Nikki didn't understand what was happening, but she didn't waste a second. Using the distraction to her advantage, she lunged to the side, away from the cliff's edge, her body moving on pure instinct. More gunfire rang out, followed by shouts and the sound of footsteps pounding against the rocky ground. Someone was here. But who? Friend or foe? Nikki's heart hammered as she pressed herself against a nearby boulder, trying to make sense of the sudden turn of events. The attackers were now scrambling, some returning fire, others ducking for cover. Whoever had arrived wasn't playing around. Then, Through the haze of dust and confusion, she saw him. A familiar figure moving with precision and purpose, his stance unwavering even as bullets flew. Her breath caught in her throat. It couldn't be. After everything that had happened, after all the betrayal and pain, he was the last person she expected to see. And yet, there he was, fighting his way toward her as if nothing else in the world mattered. A mix of emotions surged through her, relief, anger, disbelief, but above all, an overwhelming sense of hope. He hadn't abandoned her. Not when it counted. As he drew closer, their eyes locked, and for a fleeting moment, the chaos around them faded away. The intensity in his gaze told her everything she needed to know. He wasn't leaving without her. But the moment was shattered by another volley of gunfire, forcing them both back into survival mode. "Stay down," he shouted, his voice cutting through the noise as he returned fire, taking out one of the assailants with a clean shot. Nikki nodded, her body trembling but her resolve strengthening. She wasn't alone anymore. Together, they might just make it out of this alive. The battle raged on, each second stretching into an eternity as Nikki clung to the slim chance of escape. Her rescuer, her unlikely hero, fought with a ferocity that left no doubt about his intentions. He wasn't just here to save her, he was here to end this. Once and for all. And as the dust settled and the echoes of gunfire faded, Nikki realized something with startling clarity. No matter what had happened between them, no matter how complicated their past was, some bonds were unbreakable. Even in the face of death, he had come for her. And that changed everything. The silence that followed was almost deafening. The attackers were either dead or had fled, leaving behind only the eerie stillness of the cliffside and the heavy weight of what had just transpired. Nikki's legs threatened to give out beneath her, the adrenaline crash hitting her like a tidal wave. She sank to her knees, her breath ragged, her hands shaking. She couldn't believe she was still alive. He was at her side in an instant, his strong hands gripping her shoulders as he searched her face for injuries. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his voice rough with urgency. Nikki shook her head, unable to form words. The relief in his eyes was palpable, but it was quickly replaced by something darker, something haunted. "I thought I was too late," he admitted quietly, the words heavy with unspoken regret. Nikki swallowed hard, her throat tight. There was so much she wanted to say, so much anger and hurt still simmering between them, but none of it mattered right now. He had saved her life. Again. And that meant something. Before she could respond, the distant sound of sirens cut through the air, growing louder by the second. Backup was coming. Whether it was the police or more enemies, neither of them knew, and they weren't sticking around to find out. He pulled her to her feet, his grip firm but gentle. "We need to go. Now." Nikki didn't argue. She couldn't. There would be time for questions later, for explanations and confrontations, but for now, survival was the only priority. As they moved away from the cliff, away from the danger, Nikki couldn't help but glance back one last time. The edge where she had nearly met her end seemed smaller now, less imposing. But the memory of those terrifying seconds, the sheer helplessness, would stay with her forever. And so would the knowledge that, when it mattered most, he had been there. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and unresolved tension, but for the first time in what felt like forever, Nikki didn't feel alone. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the rugged landscape as they disappeared into the gathering dusk. The cliffside stood silent once more, a witness to the violence and the salvation that had unfolded on its edge. But for Nikki, the real journey was just beginning. And this time, she wouldn't have to face it alone. Nikki Newman had always known life in Genoa City was full of complications, secrets, and danger, but nothing could have prepared her for the terror she now faced, standing alone on the edge of a jagged cliff as the sun dipped behind a curtain of stormy clouds, casting long shadows over the canyon below. The air was thick with tension, her breath catching in her throat as the wind whipped her hair around her face. She had been lured there by a text message she thought was from Victor, begging her to come quickly, saying he was in danger. Her heart had been in her throat as she raced to the remote cliffside, the location so far removed from the city it felt more like a bad dream than reality. But Victor wasn't there. Instead, someone else was waiting, someone cloaked in shadows and menace, someone whose voice she recognized but couldn't immediately place. They hadn't spoken long, but what they said chilled her to the bone. "This is what you get for what you did all those years ago," they hissed. Nikki's confusion only deepened. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, trying to steady her shaking hands. But the figure only laughed bitterly, stepping closer, backing her toward the precipice. Panic surged through her. She tried to reason with them, tried to keep them talking, anything to buy time. She even reached into her purse, fingers trembling, for her phone, but it was yanked from her hand and thrown over the cliff without hesitation. "You don't get to call anyone," the figure growled. "This is justice." Nikki's mind was spinning. Who had she wronged that badly? She had enemies, sure, but this wasn't business. This was deeply personal. The figure advanced again, and Nikki lost her footing, one heel skidding on the loose gravel. Her arms flailed as she caught herself from falling, her back now inches from the edge. "Please," she whispered, her voice catching. But mercy wasn't in her attacker's eyes. That's when she screamed. A blood-curdling scream that echoed through the canyon like a wounded animal's cry. It wasn't just for help, it was primal, a plea for life itself. Somewhere deep inside her, the memory of being strong, of surviving trauma and addiction and betrayal, kicked in. She wasn't going down like this. She grabbed a handful of gravel and flung it into the attacker's face. They screamed in surprise, momentarily blinded, and Nikki ducked low, slipping past them and sprinting toward the trail she had come up. But her escape was short-lived. They recovered quickly and chased after her. She could hear their boots pounding the dirt behind her, getting closer. Her lungs burned, and her legs screamed in protest. She hadn't run like this in years, not since her days of hiding bottles and lies. And just when she thought she might collapse, she heard something. A voice calling her name. "Nikki!" It was faint, almost lost in the wind, but it was real. She screamed again. "Help me," she cried, her voice raw with desperation. "Help!" Then out of the trees, like a vision sent by fate, came a figure running toward her. Tall, strong, focused. She thought it was Victor at first, but as they came closer, she saw the face. It was Nick. Her son. Her beautiful, brave, headstrong son who had always been her protector. "Mom," he called again, and this time his voice was fierce. He saw the attacker closing in and didn't hesitate. Nick threw himself into them, the two men tumbling onto the ground in a flurry of fists and shouts. Nikki collapsed nearby, gasping for air, her body trembling. She watched in horror as Nick fought off the assailant, who was stronger than he looked. But Nick had something else on his side, purpose. Family. Love. He managed to get the upper hand, pinning the attacker down and shouting for Nikki to call the police. "My phone," he threw it, she said, voice shaking. "Then get to the car." Nick barked, not taking his eyes off the man beneath him. Nikki scrambled up and staggered toward the path, heart pounding, but she wasn't alone for long. Another figure appeared from the trail, Victor, this time for real. "Nikki," he shouted, running toward her. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing with relief and adrenaline. "Nick's got him," she managed to say. "He tried to kill me, Victor. He said it was payback for something I did." Victor's eyes narrowed, cold fury washing over his face. "He's not going to hurt you again," he promised, and together they ran back to where Nick was still holding the attacker down. The man was bleeding, face scraped from the fight, but he was alive and furious. He spat on the ground and sneered at Victor. "You think this ends here? You think you can cover up what she did? What are you talking about?" Victor growled. "Who are you?" The man laughed bitterly, his eyes filled with contempt. "You don't even remember, do you? My mother worked for you 20 years ago. She got fired after she got pregnant, and nobody believed her when she said the father was one of you. She killed herself because of you rich bastards and your lies. And Nikki knew. She knew and said nothing." Nikki's eyes widened in horror. I remember," she whispered, as pieces of the past clicked into place. "But I didn't know she, oh my God." Victor turned to her, stunned. "Is this true?" "It was so long ago," she said, tears streaking down her cheeks. "I didn't think she would. I never meant, but the damage had been done." The police arrived minutes later, sirens piercing the night as red and blue lights lit the canyon in a surreal glow. Nick gave his statement, and the attacker, whose name was revealed to be Marcus, was hauled away in handcuffs, still spewing accusations and threats. Nikki sat in the back of the ambulance, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes vacant. Victor stood beside her, one hand protectively on her shoulder. Nick paced nearby, barely containing his rage. "How did you know to come?" Nikki asked finally, her voice a whisper. Nick knelt beside her. "Phyllis called me. She said she overheard you telling someone where you were going and it didn't sit right. She tried to call you and when she couldn't reach you, she called me. She saved my life," Nikki said, blinking slowly. "So did you." "We don't let people hurt our family," Nick said, and Victor nodded grimly. "This isn't over," he said. "Whoever helped this man lure you here, whoever gave him your number or sent the fake message pretending to be me, they're going to pay." Nikki closed her eyes, letting the hum of the ambulance soothe her frayed nerves. Her life had flashed before her eyes on that cliff. Everything she had worked so hard for, her sobriety, her family, her peace, it had almost been taken in an instant. And for what? Secrets buried in the past that had come back like ghosts to haunt her. The next day in Genoa City, the news spread like wildfire. Rumors flew. Was Nikki Newman targeted because of something she did in the past? Was this connected to Victor's enemies, or something else entirely? The press hovered around Newman Enterprises, desperate for a quote, but Victor issued a stern warning that anyone harassing his wife would be dealt with swiftly. At home, Nikki tried to act like everything was fine, but the trauma lingered. Every noise made her flinch. Every shadow outside made her wonder. She stared at old photographs, trying to remember the woman who had worked for them, the one Marcus had called his mother. Her name was Elise. She had been kind, soft-spoken. Nikki had liked her. But then one day, she was gone, and nobody had talked about it. Nikki had assumed she found another job. She hadn't known about the pregnancy. And now it was too late. She couldn't apologize. She couldn't make it right. But maybe, just maybe, she could stop it from happening again. Days passed, and the family tried to return to normal. But nothing was normal anymore. Not when Nikki looked over her shoulder every time she left the house. Not when she woke up from nightmares of falling. Not when Nick kept replaying the fight in his head, wondering what would have happened if he hadn't gotten there in time. And not when Victor began investigating who had helped Marcus set this trap. Because someone had. Marcus didn't just stumble onto Nikki's private number. Someone gave it to him. Someone close. A betrayal was still waiting to be uncovered, and when it would be war. Nikki knew one thing for sure, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something much darker. And while she had survived this cliffhanger, there were still others waiting. Shadows that whispered, secrets that screamed, and someone, somewhere, who still wanted revenge.